October 2004, I was Detective Sergeant in Balbriggan Garda Station. A guy came in, one of the detectives came in and said there's some sort of a burglary in progress in the Knoll. I just grabbed a set of keys to a car, made my way down to Lambay View, which was the name of the house that this burglary had taken place. As I was driving up, there was calls coming in over the radio about a lady being assaulted, that is a burglary gone wrong, and it said this lady is dead. I arrived at the scene. Being a qualified and experienced scenes of crime examiner, I went in to have a look. It's a sight I'll never forget. My God, she was like pulverized. Her hair was matted in blood. Over her right ear, there was a gash you can see down to her skull. It was about 5 inches long. You could see that there was severe force used to inflict that. So the poor woman had no chance whatsoever, absolutely not. Like, it was savage, cold, just like unbelievable, really, you know.
Rachel Callally was discovered by her mother, Rose.
I will never forget the sight that met my eyes. I'll never forget it. And God love her. I knew immediately I looked at her, she was murdered. I remember just kneeling down beside her, and I remember putting my hand over and I kept rubbing her arm, and she was like marble.
Rose's husband, Jim, arrived at the scene soon afterwards.
Oh, it was terrible. I hate even thinking about it, you know?
None of us expect to lose a child, you know, but it was dreadful.
It was a terrible part of our life, you know?
It's just a parent's nightmare, like. And I remember Jim, my God, the grief. That's my daughter down there, that's my daughter that's killed down there. And he was roaring and shouting at me and venting a little bit of anger, but it was pure just grief, like, you know, what he had to witness. A good investigator has to have empathy. He has to see what pain these people go through. You know, these loved ones, they have to be looked after as best they can by the state. Who has Rachel got to speak for? But the guards, the person investigating this, to find the truth.
She was a real natural beauty, wasn't she? Isn't that a beautiful one?
Yeah.
And that was her wedding day.
Yeah. Good, she looked well there, didn't she?
We had 2 boys first. The 2 boys were adopted, and then we adopted Rachel. She was like a breath of fresh air. She really was a joy.
She went in for everything. Basketball, badminton. She was on a hockey team. She went in for swimming. Just always on the go, you know? That's the way I remember her.
And she'd loads of friends. She would walk to Cork in her bare feet for you. She was very, very good-natured and very loving.
Oh, that was gorgeous. Here's Rachel.
Rachel was 30 years old. She lived in Lambay View in North Dublin with 2 young sons and her husband, Joe. Detective Sergeant Pat Marry now began a murder investigation.
Rachel's movements on that morning was the same as any other school-going morning. Joe told us, and the Callallys told us, that she'd leave the house around 9 o'clock and she'd drop one of the children to the school, and then she'd drop the other child to the creche.
A CCTV camera just around the corner from Lambay View captured Rachel's movements.
The CCTV footage showed a car exactly the same as Rachel's passing at 9:03. We knew from the creche she was there at 9:30 because people had seen her, and we have her car returning to her house past the quarry at 9:41. From the quarry to her house was 30 seconds in the car.
Pat could now conclude Rachel was murdered sometime after 20 to 10.
Joe then informed us that at 1:30 p.m. approximately, he got a call from the creche to say that Rachel hadn't collected the child. He rang her phone and didn't get an answer. He rang the Callalees home number and asked Rose to go out and see where Rachel was, that he was worried.
She thought she might have fell or something, you know. So Rose went straight out there.
Rose found Rachel's body at 2 p.m. Pat now needed to uncover what happened in the 4 hours and 20 minutes before then.
We had to find out the answers to these questions. Who hit her? Why did they kill her? What was behind all of this? What was the motive?
But Pat wasn't the only one trying to find answers.
Rachel O'Reilly, the 30-year-old mother of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old child, was brutally beaten to death.
Her badly beaten body was discovered several hours
The body
later.
of Rachel O'Reilly was found in the bedroom of her home at the Knoll in North.
A post-mortem reveals she was killed with a blunt
Say the
instrument.
Gardaí have not found the murder weapon and have no real leads in the case.
My name is Jenny Friel and I'm a journalist with the Irish Daily Mail newspaper, formerly Ireland on Sunday. Well, from the moment it happened, it was a huge story. A young mum of 2 being found bludgeoned to death in her own bedroom in her house in a rural part of North Dublin. I think Rachel was only born a year before I was, so yeah, I was very aware of that particular story, and also because by the time I got asked to follow up on it, the working theory was that it was a burglary gone wrong.
Pat was quickly skeptical that Rachel was killed by burglars.
We looked at every burglary in the area and see was there any correlation to or anything that connected the crimes, and there wasn't, like, you know.
For Pat, it just did not look like a typical burglary.
A scene talks to you. A scene tells you things. I noticed the kitchen table turned over, which is unusual. Kitchen presses pulled out. Burglars don't come in. They don't open kitchen presses. They don't open the knife drawer. They don't open where you keep the cups and saucers. They just don't do that. And also, we discovered in the house that there was money left there. Rachel had money in her bag, and there was money in the utility room, which was never, you know, touched.
The team extended their search.
There was some items found in a culvert up the road slightly from the house. I think a jewellery box and a camcorder, which was identified as coming from the house. But burglars don't do that either, like, you know, you're not going to hide it to come back again. Like, you know, you just know these things from your experience of dealing with burglaries. It was a staged burglary.
But the most decisive evidence was the state of Rachel's body.
It's highly unusual to see someone in the state I saw Rachel O'Reilly in, having been administered such a beating by a burglar. The viciousness of the assault was a pure display of hate for this woman. If you hate someone that much, you're going to know them. And I believed she knew who did this to her.
Pat began to investigate whether any of Rachel's acquaintances could have wanted her dead.
Our starting point was to talk to Joe O'Reilly to see if there was anyone in her life that would do what they did. Maybe she has some enemies. He went on to name people that he worked with, that he had sacked and he had run-ins with.
Pat and his team followed up with everyone on Joe's list.
All the people that Joe had named were people that we could easily rule out of any connection with Lambay View on the day. And then I asked him, maybe she was having an affair and that you had a disgruntled wife who got this done. And he says, no, neither of us were having affairs. Now, that just sparked with me. Why did he say neither of us having an affair? I didn't ask him about him. I said it to Joe. I said, are you sure you weren't having an affair? And he looked at me right in my eyes, and I was looking at him. And he says, I did have an affair. And I said, who'd you have an affair with? He said, a girl by the name of Nikki Pelly. It was only an affair, it's over now. And he says, I don't want anyone to know about the affair, and I don't want my family to know. It made us sit up and think, well, is there something else to this, you know?
At the time Rachel was murdered, Joe was 31. He was working for an outdoor advertising agency. He was a manager there. He was a non-drinker. He was a physical guy, he went to the gym a lot. He was well liked by their friends, and he was sociable.
You over here, come talk. Come on, it's 5 kids.
I asked Joe, could he account for his movements that morning? He said he got up at 5:20 a.m. He said he slept in a separate room, and the reason he done that is because he didn't want to waken Rachel when he was going out so early. He said he went to a gym on Nanga Road. He left the gym and arrived at his workplace in Viacom at about 7:15, and he remained there until approximately 8:15.
At 8:15, Joe left his office and drove to Broadstone bus depot in Phibsborough. He was to meet a work colleague and inspect advertising in buses.
He said he went back to Viacom after leaving Broadstone in Phibsborough at 11:20 approximately, and he got back to Bluebell Industrial Estate to Viacom at around 12 midday. Around 1:30 p.m. he got a phone call from the creche to say that Rachel hadn't collected the child.
Joe arrived home shortly after Rose and Jim.
Rose said to him, Rachel, she's down the bed, I think she's been murdered. And he ran down and he saw her, and he got down on his knees, put his hand in, and he said, Rachel, Rachel, what are you after doing? You know, which was a strange thing to say.
Joe hugged Rachel's body, getting her blood on his clothes. Pat was concerned that Joe was compromising the crime scene, so quickly sealed off the house for a forensic examination. One week later, Joe was allowed to return.
He rang here and he said he'd got the keys, the forensics were finished. He said there's an inner piece in the house, and he said I was thinking of you and Rose came down. Maybe the do you's good. So I put it to Rose, and Rose said to me, Jim, sure, I wouldn't go down there. And I said, well, the two of us in a bad way, I don't think we could be any worse.
It might do you good, Rose, he said. You know, would you not give it a try?
When we went down there, it was, oh God, I wanted to run out of the place. Jeez, when I saw the room, it was like a morgue. There was blood everywhere, ceilings, walls and all, and I nearly got sick.
But more disturbing than the house was Joe's behaviour.
He was reenacting what the murderer would have done. And I remember I couldn't even think of what he was saying to us.
He said, I reckon this is the way it happened. He said the murderer must have got her down on the ground and kept batting her on the head.
He went through the actions of how Rachel would have got hit on the front of the head. She would have went down. He even enacted stepping over the body. Whoever done this went into the bathroom to clean up and heard her gurgling and came back and finished her off.
I was getting sick. I had to go outside, you know, and what he was doing then, you see, he was down on the floor and he was reenacting the whole thing, and he was looking at me and looking at Rose. And he was getting a kick out of looking at the horror in her face. I'd say my face was drained out. And, you know, but his eyes were jumping out of his head looking at me. Sadistic pleasure he was getting out of looking at squirming, you know. There and then I knew then that he was a psycho, you know.
So if I'd any doubt at all, I was saying to myself, walking out that house, it was Joe done it.
Over the following days, Joe O'Reilly's behaviour became increasingly erratic. He even began engaging with the media. So journalist Jenny Frail approached him for an interview.
I thought that I'd get there and I'd be politely told to go away, and I was prepared for that. So when he agreed to do an interview, I was quite surprised. And also he had agreed, you know, for a photographer to come with me, which is for a newspaper is a big deal as well.
O'Reilly met Jenny at Lambay View, the scene of the murder, where he now posed for photographs.
He was like a tour guide. He was talking us through the blood splatter on the walls. He was pointing up to the ceiling, the skirting board, talking us through how ferocious the attack must have been for there to be as much blood splatter as there was. I had never experienced anything like this before. He got down on one knee and demonstrated how the killer would have basically bought the weapon down on Rachel's head. At that point, I felt a bit queasy, and I asked him where the bathroom was. I just needed a break. I remember thinking at the time that I guess I had to put it down to his grief and possibly shock. Maybe this was just his way of coping and trying to do everything he could that might help catch her killer.
But this was not the end of Joe O'Reilly's media push.
On the day of the murder, I did say to him, Joe, there's going to be media interest in this, and I'd prefer you don't talk to the media. Joe done the opposite.
With me tonight, Rachel's husband, Joe, and her mother, Rose. You're very welcome. Thank you for coming in. Rose, thank you. Tell me a little bit about Rachel, Joe. What sort of a woman was she?
Just a normal woman.
At that stage, I couldn't bear to be in his company because I knew, you know, he had murdered Rachel. You know, to have to sit beside him, it was awful now.
It was an extraordinary piece of television. And anyone will tell you this, it was Rose Callilly's body language and just the look of anger on her face. She just looked angry. She couldn't look at Joe when he spoke. She was holding herself extremely rigidly.
How did you two meet?
We met years ago, about 13 years ago, at softball, which is a game like baseball, where Rachel took it up. She was a lot better than I was, so...
He's so blasé and laid back. Like, look at... He was coming out with flippant answers about when he got engaged and everything.
You proposed to her where?
In Paris, up the Eiffel Tower. So it was either propose or she'd throw me off. So.
All right.
Joe was being Joe. He was being super friendly and doing his best to answer every question he could.
You hear, you know, out-of-body experiences and stuff. I just literally felt like I was at the outside looking in at myself.
You know, when I look back, I don't know how I got through it. I just was recoiling, and when he'd say something, I'd feel like jumping up and running off. To be honest with you, that night, my whole thing was getting through it and not to react to him at all.
She's gone, she's dead, what happened? And I said, I think she fell.
If I knew the police thought it better that we didn't, I wouldn't have went with him. You know, but it was an ordeal, I can tell you.
My view as well would be, and again, it's just my view, it's not a police theory, it's just my own personal belief, is that she knew the person, because why else would you kill her? If it's a violent robbery, why go to the extreme of murdering the person unless they can identify you? And that's why we've talked about this and practically nothing else for the last 3 weeks. We just feel it's someone she would have known or someone she could have identified.
No, she didn't know you well enough. That makes me physically ill. Like he's literally speaking to himself. So it will just send chills up your back.
Picked up Adam, and when I was picking up
Television, the impact it has, I think that was the turning point. In a case that had already stoked a lot of interest, it just went crazy after that because it was unusual that a family went on that soon after a murder.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
But for Pat, there was more to Joe O'Reilly's Late Late Show appearance than what was shown on TV.
I interviewed the staff of the Late Late Show, the people who were in the green room and that, who would have looked after the guests. They said he was acting like a man who wasn't in any way grieving. The Callillys couldn't look at a cup of tea. They were nervous and upset. And Joe scoffed all the sandwiches and all the crisps and drank all the tea.
He was down the sandwiches. He had half a tray of sandwiches. Someone would be eating one.
He was on his mobile phone and walking around and talking on his mobile phone, and they said he wasn't in one bit clued into what was at stake, like, you know.
The night produced more than just anecdotal evidence. Pat discovered O'Reilly's affair with Nikki Pelly was far from over.
RTE had offered them, I think, a hotel room to go to, you know, and Joe said, I'm not taking up that offer. I have to go, I have to meet a client.
He wasn't going to a business meeting at all. He got your man to leave him up to Nicky Pelly's house with Farnham.
Joe O'Reilly had told Pat the affair was over. It was now clear he had lied.
So here you have a case where a man's going on the TV to appeal for witnesses or information in respect of the death of his wife. And then he's gone off with his mistress, like, you know, to spend the night with her. It's just not right, like, you know.
Pat looked deeper into Joe's private life and discovered evidence of a long-standing affair.
He was in love with Nicky Pelly, and he played down his relationship with Nicky. He'd tell Rachel, I'm working late, I'm going to stay in the office, and he was having a full relationship with her.
She had stayed over in Rachel's house one night when she wasn't there. She had met the children. He had, you know, arranged Saturday afternoon outings. I think they brought them to the zoo a few times, and they knew her as their dad's friend, Nicky. And they had a future planned together. It had become a very serious relationship very quickly.
Joe O'Reilly also knew how suspicious the relationship would look to detectives.
He had told Nicky, don't admit that we're having a full-on relationship, because the guards will think it will be a motive, you know, which it was a motive, and which we could establish.
As Pat dug deeper, he discovered evidence of the mental and physical strain Rachel was suffering.
There were friends who kind of spoke about how she developed psoriasis, a skin condition, because she was so stressed out. On one occasion, she said that she worried about having put on weight, and maybe Joe wasn't interested in her because of that, and she was going to try and lose weight. And maybe she had to pay more attention to what she was wearing, because she wasn't really into clothes and fashion.
They were all telltale signs of deep emotional abuse, something that at the time wasn't as well recognised as it is today.
Sarah Benson, CEO with Women's Aid. Back in 2004, I was actually the manager of the National Domestic Violence Helpline, and that particular case was very much on my radar at the time when it happened. I think still now, but even more so back in 2004, there would have been a common misperception that the most common sign of a domestic abuse relationship was physical abuse. That's not actually the case. Domestic violence is not a single act of violence. What it is at its core is a wide range of manipulative behaviours, emotional abuse, economic abuse, and also then, of course, the threat of or actual physical and sexual violence. But it's that pattern of behaviour actually which is the indicator of the fact that a relationship is abusive, is controlling.
I think it became clear how awful Rachel's life had been in the last 6 months to a year. Whatever kind of horrific end she met, she had dealt with such insecurity, stress.
What a domestic violence abuser gains by all of this behaviour, which does require work, is they have control and they have power. And that controlling behaviour causes the person who's targeted to effectively change, in some cases, nearly every facet of their life, of what they wear, who they see, what they do, who they talk to. Control is the beating heart of a domestic abuse relationship.
Joe O'Reilly was clearly emotionally abusive. Now a close friend of Rachel described an incident which could have resulted in physical abuse too.
Rachel had confided in her that Rachel and Joe had a row the night before, a flaming row, and that Rachel believed that Joe was having an affair. And she put an ultimatum to Joe, if you don't change your way, things are going to change. And that was it.
Pat had established a clear motive. But there was a problem. Joe O'Reilly had an alibi. On the morning Rachel was killed, he claimed he was 30 kilometres away at Broadstone bus depot with a work colleague.
We wanted to establish, was that person there in the depot that Joe was going to see that morning? And we discovered he couldn't have seen the person that he went to see because he wasn't there. This was very important to us because it broke Joe's alibi. If Joe wasn't seen in Broadstone and there was nobody, and I mean no one that could put him there, where was he?
Pat was now certain O'Reilly had lied about his whereabouts on the morning of Rachel's murder. If he wasn't at Broadstone, could he have been at home with Rachel? Pat turned again to the CCTV from Murphy's Quarry.
Okay, we're just coming up here now to Murphy's Quarries. It's very significant for us in our investigation, in that it was the only CCTV in the area. The camera was up high and it captured the entrance and part of the road.
This was the camera that had filmed Rachel's car on the school run.
We had Rachel's car passing down past the quarry at 9:03 and going up again at 9:41.
While Rachel was on the school run, another car was spotted heading towards the O'Reilly home. It appeared to be a Fiat Marea estate, the same car Joe O'Reilly drove.
We had another car at 10 past going up towards Lambay View, a car we believe to be Joe O'Reilly's car. We could see that same car coming back past the quarry at 9:59.
Could this be evidence of Joe O'Reilly returning to the house, killing Rachel, and then leaving again? It all hung on identifying the car and its owner.
We could establish there was 2,500 such Fiat Marea estate cars in the country. We had to go and try and trace every one of those cars to eliminate them from passing Murphy's Quarries that morning.
Using the National Vehicle Database, the team began contacting Fiat Marea car owners living locally.
We were able to account for all the Fiat Marea estate cars that were registered and owned by people nearest to Lambay View, and there was no doubt in my mind as an investigator that the only Fiat Marea car that was up there at that time was Joe O'Reilly's car.
But was it definitely a Fiat Marea? Only evidence from an expert would hold up in court.
We engaged the services of a company called Calligate in the UK. They were expert CCTV analysts and they could identify cars.
The team hoped for a positive ID, but were disappointed.
It wasn't a 100% hit from Calligate. They could only surmise it was a Fiat Marea estate car. On a scale of 1 to 5, they marked it 4 out of 5. They couldn't be 100% certain.
Without 100% certainty, the evidence would not hold up in court.
Investigations always have setbacks and you don't always get what you want, but you don't lose heart. Even though you might have hit a wall, there's always a way over the wall, around the wall.
Pat needed another way to prove whether Joe O'Reilly was near Lambay View at the time of the murder. So he turned to a type of analysis still brand new in 2004. Pat asked engineers if O'Reilly's mobile phone data could pinpoint his location.
O2 were in a position to tell us of a thing called cell site analysis that could establish where a phone was, what phone mast the phone was pinging off, if they had received or made a call or received or made a text. Now, this was all new to us.
It was groundbreaking stuff. Phone signals have to basically ping off the nearest mast. And through that, they were able to track Joe O'Reilly's phone on the morning of the murder.
Cell site analysis tracked Joe's phone from his home in the Knoll to his office in Bluebell Industrial Estate. It confirmed he left there at 8:15 and headed to Phibsborough bus depot.
It's at that point that Joe's story begins to come offline. At 8:46 a.m, when Joe told us he was in Phibsborough depot, we have his phone travelling north at the M1-M50 junction. 10 minutes later, at 8:56 a.m, we had him at Richardstown, which was just 5 miles south of his house in the Knoll. At 9:25 a.m, we had Joe at Murphy's Quarries, which is only several hundred yards from his house. And at 9:52 a.m, his phone was still at Murphy's Quarries.
What that proved was that at the time he said he was in Broadstone Garage in Phibsborough checking ads on the side of buses, he wasn't. He was actually in the house at the time when his wife was being murdered.
At last, Pat had the evidence he needed to make a decisive move against Joe O'Reilly.
At around 10:20 this morning, detectives arrested the man at his home in the Knoll area and brought him to Drogheda Garda station for questioning.
Joe was initially arrested on November the 17th, 2004. We put questions to Joe in respect of the phone records, telling lies about his affair, that this was a motive, and to explain all of that. By and large, Joe declined to cooperate with us and say no comment, and that was it.
Pat was left with little to go on.
We had circumstantial evidence. We had no murder weapon. We had no forensics of any benefit. We had no confession. With circumstantial evidence, there always is a doubt.
Joe walked free. The circumstantial evidence was just not enough to charge him. It was a blow to Pat and the team. Months passed. Pat continued working the case, often dropping in on Rose and Jim to ask questions.
Jim, I remember on one of the occasions that I visited the Callally family during the course of the investigation, and there were many. And I'll tell you, Rose does a good sandwich and a cup of tea when you arrive, you know. The pain and suffering that you have gone through, like, it's horrendous, like.
You feel at the time you'll never get over it, but...
On one of those visits, we'd sit around and chat, and I'd tell them how things were progressing, and she came out and says, I wonder what Joe wrote in that note.
Pat had no idea what note Rose was talking about, but it was potentially explosive.
On the night of her wake, the night before her funeral, it was suggested in the Callally household that everyone write notes to her, maybe put in little gifts, things like that.
Joe O'Reilly also wrote a note to Rachel.
Everyone was writing a little note, so he probably felt he had to. But he did write a letter, and he put it in the coffin.
We both thought the same thing. What's written on the note? Will he have a confession on it or whatever? Like, we'll have to get that note.
But to get the note, they'd have to exhume Rachel's body 6 months after she'd been buried.
Garda forensic specialists moved into the Fingal burial ground at first light this morning. The cemetery was sealed off. Gardaí set up a forensic tent and examined the body of Rachel O'Reilly.
The exhumation order was granted by the minister, and we exhumed the body and recovered all the notes that were in the coffin. All those notes were brought then to the technical lab because they had to be dried out, they had to be photographed, they have to be registered, and we were quite happy we recovered the note that Joe had left.
I imagine the Gardaí were possibly a little disappointed when they opened up that letter.
There was great ambiguity about what was written on this card.
It was a strangely heartfelt letter, for want of a better word. It was, Dear Rachel, I really miss you. Your boys miss you. Everyone misses you. You were so much loved. And he did say something along the lines of, I'm sorry, but it wasn't an admission, sorry. It was possibly a, I'm sorry this happened to you.
He was apologising to Rachel for something that only him and her knew about. Now, I was thinking, well, he's apologising for killing her. But it could have been looked on, he was apologising for something else, marriage and maybe not working out or whatever. So it couldn't be put down to that it was an admission.
By now, Pat had arrested O'Reilly twice, but faced with insufficient evidence, had to release him each time.
He left the interview room and he was going out the front with his brother. And I remember he turned around to me and he put his thumb up and he says, see you, Pat, you know, as if giving me the two fingers, like, you can't make it stick and good luck. So I felt like running out and dragging him back in. He wasn't a grieving husband. He didn't give a shit, and that's about the height of it, like, you know.
Then a lead dropped right into their lap from a witness whose story held no ambiguity.
We got a phone call from a lady who said that she was friends with Nicky Pelly. Nicky had told her Joe said that he'd kill Rachel if he got away with it.
This new evidence from a friend of Joe O'Reilly's lover now promised to give Pat the edge.
This girl said to us that Nicky had told her Joe said that he'd kill Rachel if he got away with it. We had no reason to go back to Nikki a second time, and she was arrested based on this new information. We questioned her, and she admitted, yes, Joe said it to me that he'd kill her if he could get away with it. But she says, I didn't think anything of it, just rubbish talk, like she wouldn't have thought that he'd do such a thing.
While Nikki Pelly downplayed Joe O'Reilly's admission, Pat knew this testimony gave him a much stronger case to put before the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Here we have a witness that's saying Joe had said it to his girlfriend that he'd kill Rachel if he could get away with it. And it was that bit of evidence, or that statement, that the DPP changed their mind, like, you know.
Joe O'Reilly arriving at Swords District Court earlier today. The 35-year-old had been arrested this morning at a house in Dunleer, County Louth, and brought to Balbriggan Garda Station.
Joe was arrested in October 2006. I and some of the detectives went to Dunleer, where his mother lived. We know he was staying there. Joe was standing in the kitchen in his stocking feet, and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, Joe, I'm arresting you for the murder of Rachel O'Reilly. And he just said, can I put my runners on? He turned and he faced me, and I've never seen it before, but the blood drained from his face. He went white as a sheet. He was not expecting it.
Detective Sergeant Pat Marry told the court that at 10:55 a.m. he formally charged Mr. O'Reilly with the murder of his wife, Rachel O'Reilly, on October 4th, 2004 at the Knoll in County Dublin.
It was a great sense of relief to know they had what they thought was their man, and I was sure it was too, you know. Even looking at him that morning, they picked him up, brought him out to the VAR. The look on his face, I knew he was guilty, you know. It's funny the way you get these feelings.
But Joe pleaded not guilty. His trial was set for June 2007.
It was a huge trial. I think every media organisation had 2 or 3 journalists down. And yeah, you were fighting for seats every morning. The public galleries were absolutely packed. The court ushers were saying that they hadn't seen anything like it. It was June, and it just seemed that there was nothing else going on except for this court case.
Today at the Central Criminal Court, Joe O'Reilly pleaded not guilty to his wife's murder. A jury was then sworn in to hear this trial, which is expected to last 6 weeks.
This was the old courtroom, like space was at a premium. Remember, there were days when I'd end up sitting kind of beside Joe with just a prison guard sitting in between us. Like, that's how squished into the place you were. And he was a big guy, so he's really imposing on these really small, kind of narrow benches. And everyone's staring at him.
I hated looking at him. And he used to be writing things. Like, he was like one of the people defending him. And I used to feel like I was drowning, because I used to look at him and how blasé he was, and how that got to me an awful lot.
He had a grandioso type of personality, like, and most psychopathic people do. They have a confidence about them that they'll beat the system, that they'll be seen to be innocent at the end of the day, that we have made a mess of it, or we have it wrong, or whatever.
Key to the prosecution's case was a string of emails recovered from Joe O'Reilly's computer. They revealed a deeply manipulative plan.
The jury was given details of an exchange of emails between Joe O'Reilly and his sister Anne on the 9th of June 2004, 4 months before Rachel was killed.
I suppose one of the most distressing days for the Callaleys would have been the emails between Joe and his sister Anne that kind of revealed how he had been undermining Rachel for a long time, poisoning certainly his own family against her, about her capabilities as a mother.
He was saying, oh, she was getting them dressed last night and she nearly pulled the ear off one of the children putting on the pyjamas, and she dragged the other one down to bed, and painting the picture that she was a monster, like, you know, which she was far from.
To the point where, and we learned this through the emails, that his own mother had reported Rachel to the social services. So how stressful must that have been to be called in to a social services officer to try and prove to someone that you've never met before that you're fit and able, and then to wonder, you know, who could have reported you? It must have been unbearable for her.
Joe O'Reilly's behaviour was typical of an abusive partner attempting to exert control.
Well, a common tactic would be to try and create an external picture of the victim as being either incompetent or perhaps even, you know, questioning their mental health or their behaviours. Like in this case, create a perception that perhaps she was not just a bad mother, but suggesting she might have been a risk to the children, which none of this is true. Now, the cause of that is actually the perpetrator, who is targeting the people who are probably best placed to support her, so it deflects the focus and the blame. It also means that they, instead of offering support, may actually reinforce the messages that he is kind of putting in her head constantly, that she is a bad mother, that there is something wrong.
Every one of those things that he told were complete and utter lies. And he was taking her character, and like as if she didn't love the children, I think they were the best things that happened to her.
He was manipulating her and trying to destroy her, really. He was taking away the things that were most important to her, her kids.
Joe's plan to use social services against his wife had failed.
In the first email, Mr. O'Reilly's sister, Anne, asks him how he got on. He replies that the social worker described Rachel as the main caregiver and him as the secondary caregiver. I'm already Mr. Weekend custody in the eyes of the state, he says. Doesn't bode too well, does it?
That's what he was relaying to his sister, that they were falling on Rachel's side, that she was a wonderful mother, and that he was going to be Mr. Weekend Dad.
The emails made Joe O'Reilly's motives clear. He wanted Rachel out of his life, but he wanted custody of their kids first.
It had been made clear to him that if they did get divorced or separated or whatever, he had no chance of getting custody of those children, because in Ireland, custody always goes to the mother.
He wanted his way, and he didn't get it, and he wasn't going to get it, so the only way is to kill Rachel.
For the family, finally hearing the details of Joe's manipulation was devastating.
We were just sickened how he spoke of her, the mother of your children, even if he hated her. And I often felt, God love her, she probably went through hell without saying anything to us.
We were shocked, really, to hear some of the things that he had said. You know, things that we wouldn't believe. You couldn't imagine him saying about Rachel what he said, and downgrading her all the time.
Coercive control is the playbook of a domestic abuser, a series of behaviours that have the impact on the victim, creating a situation where every single moment of her life, every choice, every decision she makes is controlled from within her own head, because she has been so worn down and, in some cases, gaslit, which would mean making somebody believe that they are incompetent, foolish, or even crazy in some cases. And all that does is hold somebody in a very isolated situation and make it very, very hard for them to leave.
Those emails revealed something about their relationship that we didn't know before. I think they would be even more powerful now because we know a lot more about what he was doing to her. We didn't have the terminology for it back then, but now we do, like coercive control, gaslighting. He was trying to destroy her, slowly but surely, by taking away the things that were most important to her, her job as a mother, the life that she had built for them in the Knoll.
It was strong evidence of a motive for murder, but still only circumstantial. Pat had no forensic proof to physically link O'Reilly to the crime, but he had the next best thing.
Without the phone evidence, we would have been struggling big time.
There was kind of like, it was almost like PowerPoint presentation on two screens on either side of the judge's bench. And it showed the journey his phone made up to Murphy's Quarry and back again, and the exact times that that phone either received texts, made phone calls, made text. It was very comprehensive, and it was damning, and it was groundbreaking at the time.
The technical analysis that we were able to produce to the court, that was the breaking of the alibi, the cell site analysis. You know, put Joe O'Reilly at the scene that morning, out at Baldera Knoll at the time of his wife's death.
The jury had been sent away to deliberate on a Friday, and we didn't expect them to get it done in a day. There was just so much they had to go through.
I think ours was the first case, or maybe to go into a Saturday. The court's to be shut on Saturday, apparently, but they held that court open for that. It was hard waiting for the verdict to come, you know. There could be hours there, but then they had to do what was right. They had to arrive at a right verdict, you know.
I used to be thinking to myself, what am I going to do if he gets off with it? I just knew it was a knife edge.
It's very hard to read a jury. You just do not know what they're going to come back with. We didn't know. We just did not know.
They were in there all day. It was a long, hot, stinking summer day in that courtroom, and the tension was incredible.
It took just 2 days for the jury to reach a unanimous verdict. Guilty.
They read out the verdict and the place just went nuts. I've never seen anything like it. The Callalees stood up screaming, thank God, thank God. I just remember watching Jim and Rose just hugging for the longest time and bawling, crying.
I never witnessed anything like it. I never will. The whole court erupted in a cry of emotion. And I was standing at the end of a row of all the guards who were involved in the case. And I looked down and each and every one of them were crying their eyes out. Rose, she came straight to me and the two of us had a big hug. And I burst out crying and I cried.
I just felt as if the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. As all I could do was cry.
There's that incredibly kind of like, you know, powerful picture of them coming out of the court together with all their arms raised up in the air. Because it was a victory for them.
Is there anything you'd like to say about Rachel?
It's just she's with us now, and she knows we love her, and I wish she was with us in person, and we'll never forget you, Rachel, but you got justice today. People were so supportive in those days, you know. You just felt the whole country was on our side.
For Joe O'Reilly, the verdict meant life in prison.
Joe got a few minutes to say goodbye to his mum and family. I remember Anne just holding his two arms and kind of talking quite urgently to him, and him just kind of like nodding and going, okay, okay, okay. And then he was led away by the prison officers. When you think killers are going to be, you think that you're going to spot something about them, don't you? And he was very ordinary, very normal. I've met him a million times before. I've worked with loads of people like him. Yeah, you don't want to think someone that ordinary is capable of something so awful.
I remember talking to Joe once. I sat down beside him and I said, "Just Joe, you know, I think it'd be best to tell the truth about this now." And he just turned to me and he looked at me and he put his head right up to mine. He says, "Do you know, Pat, I didn't do it." And that was it. He got up and walked off. So that was what you were dealing with, like, you know.